9 out of 10 startups fail. Women and minority-led companies receive less than 10% of all venture capital. This is an environment designed for failure. Startup Hype Man's mission is to use the power of story to make success inevitable, not the exception. And this podcast is designed for entrepreneurs to share lessons learned from their stories so that you can figure out what whatever it takes means for your company to make it. Let's kick it.
I am glad you're not recording this. This would be bad.
From the Hype HQ recording studio in Chicago, Illinois, it's Startup Hype Man, the podcast. I am your host and the Startup Hype Man, Raj Nation. Every week we bring you real talk and unpack the behind-the-curtain strategies with the entrepreneurs who are doing it or who have been there, done that, all to help your startup grow up and stand out. Join the Hype Nation to catch every new episode, plus get resources and other stuff that actually help you, not the whack promotional junk that other companies try to shove down your throat. All you have to do is add your email at startuphypeman.com. Ready for some real talk? Time now for me, Raj Nation, to turn it over to, well, me, Raj Nation, for this week's conversation. From Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, residing in Boston, Massachusetts, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the microphone, Will Herman!
Hey, Raj, that's pretty wild.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode. This is our season finale. We are with Will Herman today. Who is Will Herman? This man is quite accomplished, to say the least. So if you recall, about a year ago, we had a guest on this show by the name of Raj Bhargava, who was the co-author of the Startup Playbook. Well, he was co-author with our guest today, Will Herman. So they wrote that book together. It's a book that, none of you can see the video, but it's sitting on the bookshelf behind me right now. I recommend it to every entrepreneur that I talk to. It really is a go-to guide for entrepreneurs. Will has done more than write this book because he has experience that led him to write that book. In fact, he has started 5 different companies involved in 2 IPOs and 3 acquisitions. He's a mentor at Techstars. He's an active angel investor. When we had Raj on the show last year, I joked that he was the Michael Jordan of entrepreneurship with all the IPOs and acquisitions. Well, I mean, if you're not Jordan, then you're Tom Brady, and you're in Boston, so it works out pretty well.
Me, yeah.
So all that said, Will Herman, welcome to the show today.
Thanks so much, Raj. Great to be here.
Our topic today, and this is an awesome topic, is how do you figure out equity distribution? Can you tell our listeners sort of what this means to you, why it's on your mind, and why it's important?
Sure. Yeah. I've invested in over 70 companies, and I've run across this problem personally myself in companies that I advise and companies I've started. It is a classic problem that whacks the team early on. In fact, if it's not done correctly, it can cause a breakdown in the team over time. When people get really into it, they're working their asses off. They are struggling day to day. They'll say, "Why is it that so and so over there has 15% of the company when I only have 12.5% of the company?" Without any basis for thinking about it. It's divisive. I think CB Insights in their review of postmortems of failed companies found that team breakdown is the 3rd biggest reason for companies failing. And it's pretty clear why. I mean, we're capitalists, we're entrepreneurs. This is why we're doing it. If we feel like we're not being treated fairly, it causes loads of problems. So getting it right up front, getting as close to right as possible. There's no perfect way of doing it. It depends on each individual and each team, but getting as close to right as possible and keeping things open to change it over time are really critical to have a team that stays together.
This is going to be a very good topic for all of our listeners, and I'm very excited to dive more into it. Before we do, let's learn a little bit more about you and your background. In your sort of Michael Buffer-esque introduction that I gave you there, I mentioned you're from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. You were actually born in New York, and I think Brooklyn, you said earlier.
Brooklyn, yeah.
So let's say, now you're boss. So you're an East Coast guy, more or less. Your formative years.
I am an East Coast guy.
Your formative years were probably like the 7-8 years in Philadelphia, from around 10 years old and up. What do you think? Let me ask you this. What was it like at 9-10 years old moving, right? Because I remember around 9-10, my parents suggested moving and I threw a fit and somehow we didn't move.
Wow.
What was it like moving? And then what do you feel Philadelphia gave you?
Wow. What is it like moving? I don't really remember it that much. Although we moved from a house. I'm one of those stories about you subsequently go back to the house you grew up in, and you thought it was a mansion, and it was actually a matchbox, and that's what I was in. But we moved into an apartment outside of Philadelphia, and I think that was the biggest thing. And I had to, and I was walking to school. I also found that I was in 5th grade at the time, and I probably had the education of a 3rd grader. So from the schools I had been at previously. So it took me about 2 years to catch up in school. That's probably my biggest memory of the move there. What did Philadelphia give me? Love of cheesesteak. That's pretty clear. Soft pretzels, the 76ers, the Eagles, both of which I passed on. Now I live in Boston, of course, and Rocky. Oh yeah, Rocky. That would be it. I wonder if Rocky was actually influential in my entrepreneurial career later. I should think about that sometime.
Well, every day in business is like running up a step. So,
well, that's the good days.
Yeah,
the bad days are in the meat locker. So I don't know. Philadelphia's not an entrepreneurial town, or at least wasn't at the time. And I happened to join a startup there early on. I actually quit college to join a startup outside of Philadelphia, and it was a great experience. It failed, but it was a great experience, and I was just fortunate to find an entrepreneurial experience there because, like I said, there weren't many.
Yeah. How about because I don't expect most people to know there was an entrepreneurship hub at 11 years old for me to go to, or 14 years old, right?
Right.
Especially in the not to date you, but in the pre-internet era. Yep. How about from almost like a personality perspective, do you feel like you developed an East Coast edge to you? What do you think, almost from like a soul perspective, what did you get out of Philadelphia?
That's a tough one. I think there's a very strong sense of community in Philadelphia, and probably a lot of what led me into such a believer in building strong teams came from some of that. I mean, it's hard to tell the difference between what stuff you pick up in your family and what stuff you pick up from your community and environment. Very close personal relationships for my first time in my life. Many which have continued on now. I still communicate frequently with several of the people I met when I was 12, 13 years old. And I think that came out of what I learned, what I gleaned from the environment in Philly. Again, hard to break that out, but it's there, and it's important, and it's an important part of my life.
Now, when we get into like your professional history, what I think is very interesting here, I mentioned in your introduction, you've got an extensive background, and I only very briefly scratched the surface of it because of just how impressive it is. For everyone listening, if you've seen a LinkedIn profile before, you'll notice when you go to someone's profile, it'll show you their most recent job, and then you click a little arrow that says, click to show more experience of this person. For Will, I had to click that button 5 times because that's how much experience you have, dating all the way back to, I guess 1979. So you've done a lot, you've seen a lot, you've even, and I think it's funny because you write in your little description here, you're confused yet? So I'm just gonna read this blurb here. You said, I sold my last company, Innovata, a supplier of electronic design automation software tools, to Mentor Graphics in 2002. Innovata was created when ViewLogic, my previous company, did a reverse acquisition of Summit Design, a public company. I co-founded ViewLogic in 1984 and left the company in 1992, a year after the company's IPO. I then rejoined the company in 1995, initially as president, then as CEO. ViewLogic Systems was acquired by Synopsys in 1997. 1 year later, most of the assets acquired by Synopsys were repurchased by a small team I led via an MBO, reforming ViewLogic as a new private company. Confused yet? So I don't even know if I have a question from that. I'm more just like, wow, that's a lot that you packed into 17 years. You managed to fit into one paragraph.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot of financial engineering there, but it was a ride. It was a ride and a lot of success. I think in those transactions, we probably returned about $4 billion in value to our shareholders. We were just optimizing the whole way. It's not like we planned that. I don't think any sane person would plan that path. But we, each step of the way, we looked at what's the best way to make this happen. And another important thing there is that the team in all of those transactions remained pretty much the same. One or two people changed, but the core team remained the same through the whole thing. And that's really the core of all that success.
Yeah, I think that's a really good segue then into our topic question for today, which is how do you figure out equity distribution? Now, you mentioned at the start, you said CB Insights released that article of the top reasons for startup failure, and one of those reasons is team breakdown. What I think is interesting when I think of, wrong team, I never think of it in terms of, they couldn't figure out how to distribute ownership of the company responsibly or in a fair enough way. So it's very interesting to think that could be that could be why a team breaks down. But I think the entry point, regardless, is making sure you have the right people together. Would you say that's accurate?
Totally. It's you can't fix the problems of having the wrong team. You just can't fix them.
Now, I have had guests on this show who have who have done solo founding. I have had guests on this show and clients of mine who start companies with their best friends. I have had guests on the show who start companies with their family members. I wouldn't say there's one route because everyone finds what works for them, but regardless of who, what relationship they have to you, what do you recommend are things a person should be looking for in the founding team? What qualities or characteristics?
Yeah, so I would say that the three you mentioned, the three teams, the solo founder, the family and friends one, or family one certainly, and
best friends was the
best
third
friends. Yeah, so the third one. All of anything can work depending on the people. Those are all low percentage plays, especially solo founder, super low percentage plays. Although with my family, maybe the family one would be the lowest percentage play. And I'm sure I'm not alone in that. Sorry, sis. So I have a model that I think. Well, in my experience, this has worked best. What I like to think of is the founding team should be comprised of the people who make up the best whole person you could possibly imagine. So that is, each team member should fill in the weaknesses of the rest of the team. Now, you could do that. So by definition, you can't do that with a single person. At least I've never met that person who knows everything and has all the skills and capabilities and psychological attributes that exist. But if you know what you're doing and you know what you're building, and you know about yourself, so introspection is really important here to understand your own strengths and weaknesses. You go out and fill out the team to make up for those strengths and weaknesses. So if I'm an introvert, I at least need to go find another extrovert. Somewhere on the team, there better be some extroversion. If I am a good, a great engineering guy, I got to go find someone who's a great biz dev person. Somebody who is a great operations person, who is a great finance person. And basically, when you're done, when you can't think of any of the holes you have in your team being filled, any holes that need to be filled. When you start hiring people who know just what you know, then you've gone too far. You want the best whole person that you possibly can have, that ideal person with all of the skills and talents. I mean, one of the key questions I get as a investor is, when do I know when I'm done my founding team, and when do I start hiring my first employees? Type people, who's not getting founders equity. It's that first person who is redundant on the team, where you're increasing the amount of breadth you have instead of the amount of depth you have.
That's a really vital point there. I'm going to repeat it because I think it's important for everyone listening. So you're done. Like, if it's not your founding team and it is now your first employee, when the position is redundant, you have filled out all the gaps, all the holes, all the logic areas, and now the next person on is to reinforce an existing area that you've already covered. So my follow-up question to that is, in building that founding team, right? I think logically what you're saying makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, humans are not logical beings. And if I start a company on day one, I have some emotion around it that, like, well, I've been with this since day one, and me and my friend have been with this since day one. And person number 3, we could bring you on as a co-founder, but you came on in month 8. So you don't know what it's been like. You're technically a founder, but you haven't been with us the whole time. So can you speak to what you've seen in the entrepreneurs you've worked with? Like, what does that come up? Do they have an ego about who gets that title of founder versus employee?
Yeah. People, like you said, people are imperfect. Egos, and I'm one. I'm a guy who needs my ego stroked all the time. So I'm not.
And the way I introduced you must have been great.
Yeah, it was. It was very good. Thank you. I'm going to play that back for myself. Every time I get in the car. It's egos get in the way. I mean, egos are we all need to keep our egos in check. And when you don't, you become irrational about it, and you say, well, my founding team is based on time. It's not based on capability. It's not based on value to the organization. We stepping ahead a little bit here, we actually like to look at a process where you put yourself in sort of in the mindset of being 5 years from now. Okay, you haven't failed, which makes you rare, and you've reached some level of success. Now you're going to look back and you're going to say, what brought us that success? What were the actions? What were the capabilities? What were the core positive forward motion things that we've put in place that have made us a success? And when you look back there, it sort of takes away a 6 or 8 month or even a year long difference. If having that team together was part of the core of why you were successful 5 years from now, then it doesn't really matter, if somebody started here or there. Now, you might look at that, you might say initially the equity that a person who starts a year later than everybody else, what they get is less. And that's totally reasonable. They haven't taken the risk. They haven't done the work. So that's totally, that's total possibility. But that doesn't mean that they're not necessarily a founder.
Yeah. Now that you bring up the golden word of this conversation, which is equity, right? So you've got 4 co-founders of a company. Why do they not all deserve 25% of the company?
Yeah, well, the biggest reason is that none of the founders should be equal. There is a long line of failed companies that broke down because they did, King Solomon did, and divided the baby in half. And it just doesn't work. Somebody needs to be in charge, period. That's all there is. There has to be a bottom line. And that is so painful for startup founders. And so they take the easy way out. And by the way, I mean, the breakdown of, I'm going a little off base here, but the breakdown in equal shares is also a signal to investors. It's a signal that this team isn't strong enough to make the tough decisions. Now, sometimes that was a tough decision, getting it to equal shares, but in fact, it's generally a sign that the team couldn't sit down and say, no, there are different values, there are different reasons, there are different capabilities at the plate here, and they need to all be different. So equals generally bad.
Yeah. Well, I think I had never thought of it in the terms of, hey, you're negative signaling to investors that you don't know how to make decisions, you don't know how to share responsibly, more or less.
Right. Right.
Something that I remember, from my first business, and we weren't we weren't a startup, we were a small business, right? But my co-founder and I, for that, we made the mistake where we went in, we're like, we both have 50% ownership of the company. And we're like, no, like, we're friends. Like, we know, like, we'll be able to solve disputes and everything, right? And for the most part, we did. Where it came an issue was we got to a point where he's saying to himself, I don't want to do this anymore.
Right.
And he owns 50% of the company. So, like, I want to keep going. He wants to shut it down. And ultimately we talked it out, right? And everyone, we decided that was the right decision. But part of that was like, well, maybe, like, literally, I remember we were sitting down, I think at a Starbucks, and he was like, well, this is probably why they told us one of us should have 51%, the other should have 49%, or some other distribution like that. Because right now, like, you can't move forward without me being on board, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So yeah. I think you're right. It does create those sort of, it makes the conversation so much more difficult later on when there is disagreement. Now, how do you decide who's going to be in charge?
Right. Well, yeah. So being in charge doesn't necessarily equate to equity. An analogous situation is the co-CEO thing. So, sorry, I'm just going back on the equal distribution. Co-CEOs is another signaling sign that that you just can't make decisions. And by the way, I mean, how possibly can co-CEOs work in the long run? and everything is great while everything is great. As you point out, it's when the stuff goes off the rails that equal responsibility, equal shares have a problem. So that said, how do you decide who's in charge? Well, that's a communal effort. Sometimes it works itself out because they're not a lone founder, they're sort of the lone creator of the business, or the initial creator of the business, who's logical, who just falls into that role. They're actually building a team around them. That often happens. When it's a team of people that starts it, for people sitting around going like, hey, the world needs this, the world needs this widget, this service, this function. We suggest that it's one of the first things you talk about, after you've established that, okay, there is really a need and we can really do this thing. You've got to deal with it first. But there's no panacea here in setting up who's in charge. We strongly believe that the CEO needs to be a visionary leader, and early on needs to be an operational leader as well. And those are two unique skills and independent skills. And I'd say that the person on the team who best represents both of those skills should be in that role. And I think that's ignored often. I think often the person with the idea becomes the CEO, and the person with the idea often is not the right person to be operationally in charge. to make the tough decisions on a day-to-day basis. They may be just the idea person. And I'm not big on ideas. Ideas are good to start, but they, as the value in the company, it wanes over. Your idea wanes over time. You're going to pivot. You're going to change. You're going to adapt. There is value in that initial idea, but the real skill in the CEO is the strongest influencer, who also is best operationally, who's going to make the tough decisions moving forward.
Yeah. So, as you're talking, what I'm trying to do on my end is create like a sequence, or at least a bullet point checklist at the very least. So what I've got so far is, your founding team ends when you've filled all the holes, and the next person you bring on is not for a new skill you don't yet already have. After that, what I've got is, hey, equal distribution of your company is bad. Well, then what do you do about that? And how do you figure out who gets what? And what you've said is, well, an equity slant does not automatically mean more power goes to the more equity person. It could be the person who had the idea naturally has, a certain level of equity that someone else doesn't have. So then from there, in picking, okay, well, who should lead this company? Who is the CEO? Definitely don't do a co-CEO. But the person who's the visionary, who's both visionary and an operational leader, is best in the CEO role. Have I accurately captured that thus far?
I think that's right. I want to come back on the equity portion though, because generally speaking, if you're going to give a person the keys, and that is the operational keys. That says the CEO role is operational keys, not necessarily visionary, but operational keys. They generally need to, if they're not at the top of the equity stack, they should be very close. There might be a case where like a CEO is brought in because the original team doesn't have the operational chops to make it happen. They may not have as much as the initial founder of the company. But they generally are near the top. We have a list on equity equity distribution, where point number one is just don't split evenly. It will hurt you when you've got to make tough decisions. It's also important. So it's complex, like you said, right? Some people are going to be sacrificing salary for equity, and it's important to split that away from equity that is used to recognize and reward their abilities as part of the team, as the piece of the team, but often it gets thrown in the mix. So it's important to pull out the substitution for salary. It's important to pull out any investment that they might be making if they're throwing some capital into the company. It's always important to note that equity should be vested. It's good for the team. There's a lot of pushback and founders about having to do vesting, but it's good for the team. When you think about the other team members, if somebody bails at the end of 2 years, why should they have all of the equity that they had? It's actually a good thing. It seems bad, but it's a really good thing. It's important to recognize that equity can be changed over time. It is not absolutely fixed. So if it turns out that somebody's a better performer than they seem to be at the beginning, or more value to the company than it seemed at the beginning, that can be changed.
Let me pause you there, because that was actually my next question was, how do you go about like the redistribution of equity based on, time, performance, change in company needs, et cetera? Like what are signals? I guess what are maybe 1 to 3 signals to look for to say, hey, it's time to have a discussion around that?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of perception in that. What I see happen a lot now is that there are people along the way that decide that they really don't want to work as hard as other people. This is a big breakdown in one of the big breakdowns in founding teams, is that especially if you have mix, you have somebody who has a family and somebody who doesn't have a family. The one decides reasonably so that their work-life balance needs to be different than the others. It's really important to speak out and to discuss that as a team and say that's okay, but if I'm working 80 hours a week and you're working 40 hours a week, we shouldn't have similar amounts of equity in the company, assuming all other things that are equal. There's also times when you're making shifts all along with your product, with the company, with your focus. You do a pivot and you find that actually you're more reliant. I'm making this situation up, but you're more reliant on biz dev than your sales than you are on engineering itself. You thought you were going to be a technology-driven company, and really it turns out you're a market-driven company, you're a sales-driven company. Now, it could be that, you've got a small engineering team now, but you've got a larger sales team. You need to rebalance because that wasn't the way you set it up to begin with.
My final question before we wrap up is, you've been on the entrepreneur side, the founder side, and the investor side. So there's also an equity distribution that comes into play once investors are, quite literally on the table, on the cap table. What do you see? How should entrepreneurs be thinking about protecting / distributing equity to investors? Like, what are things to look at, like, hey, you're getting a fair deal here versus really consider if you want to give up that much?
Yeah, this is a really good question, and as you can imagine, this comes up roughly 100% of the time. I always write the numbers down. I go to a whiteboard when I'm answering this question, and I write the numbers, the math down, because the math's pretty simple. That generally speaking, again, considering 9 out of 10 companies fail, and in those failures, it makes zero difference, no difference at all. What you take, give your investors 100%, you take 100%, makes no difference. You were at zero. In that 10% of the time when the companies succeed, the only factor that matters is the size of the company. That's it. No other factor matters. So if you build, and when I say it, the size of the company, it means sort of the final valuation, the exit valuation of the company. And you're going to exit because you're talking about taking venture capital. So if the company only exceeds after 5 years to become a $10 million company, again, it doesn't matter. If the company becomes a $500 million company, then it starts to matter. But at a $500 million, everybody makes money. And whether you are shaving it by a half point or a point somewhere, you could argue, okay, well, that was, $4 million I didn't get on top of the 40 million you did. So the only factor that really matters, you should always work to try to make sure you optimize the amount of the company you retain when you bring in a venture capitalist or a group. On the margin, it just doesn't matter in the math. The math only matters in making I think about it as slices of pizza versus the whole pizza pie. By making the pie as large as possible, everybody does well. By trying to optimize the size of any slice, doesn't really work very well. So if that venture capitalist can add value to your company in big chunks, but they want 2 points extra along the way, just doesn't matter. If they can really add value, increase the size of the pie.
And what I want to reinforce here is, I know I say it in the show introduction, but I just want to reinforce it here anyways. The stat is 9 out of 10 companies fail. The reason why this conversation is important, and why all the conversations I try to have on the show are important, is because failure is the standard. It's the expectation. So if you're going to be in that 10%, you have to be willing to look at things and do things differently than what 9 of your peers are doing. Now, the flag I've chosen to put down to help with that is storytelling and brand messaging, because I think that's a vital component to this. And that's how I want to help, shift that stat. But whether it's storytelling, whether it's equity distribution, To me, to be honest, it's all of it, right? It's this, that, and the other. But these are the things, entrepreneurs who are listening, that you've got to be paying attention to and acting on if you want your company to succeed, because failure is the expectation. It is the standard. So you've got to be willing to do something better, uniquely, or differently than what everyone else is doing. Now, Will, can you let our listeners know where they can find you, where they can learn more about you?
I'm me personally, I'm on LinkedIn. I mean, easy to find. Just look up Will Herman. You can also check out, there's a whole bio and description of the book, the Startup Playbook, and startup-playbook.com. And obviously on Facebook and Twitter, I'm Will Herman, just WILLHERMAN.
Awesome. And again, every entrepreneur who I personally work with, I recommend they read the Startup Playbook. Everyone who's listening, I highly recommend you read Startup Playbook as well. It really is. I like it because it's almost like a choose your own adventure book. Like, it's like a manual. You know, if you want to flip to a certain page to read just about one section, I mean, it's not going to hurt you if you read the sections before that, but you can also read it, you know, kind of in a silo itself, and it's helpful. And there's literally a whole chapter on here's every type of capital available to you and when it makes sense and why you would do this. So, and that's just one chapter of the book. So everyone listening, get this book. And I'm not just saying that because Will is on the line.
Thanks for the plug, though.
Now, to wrap up, we finish every show, which is final top line takeaways or piece of advice from today's conversation. I'll go first and then I'll give it to you. So the topic was, how do you figure out equity distribution? My biggest takeaway out of this conversation was essentially know off the bat, equal distribution is bad, and understand that the CEO has to be the person who has the visionary skills and the operational skills, and equity should align in some fashion with them being that decision maker. Will, what's your sort of top line advice or takeaway for the entrepreneurs?
I think those are great points. I love having a good team. When you have a good, strong, solid team that works as a single unit, it is amazingly powerful what you can get done. I mean, it is the sum of the parts is way greater than any of the individual parts. And if you're successful at building a team, you can weather the tough stuff, you can take advantage of the good stuff, and you can celebrate as a team, as a family. And I think that's super important.
Will Herman, a.k.a. the Tom Brady Startup. I think Brady has 5 rings now, right?
I think it's 6.
Oh, he's got, okay. All right. Almost Brady status. You'll get that. Yeah. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for closing out another great season of the podcast.
My pleasure, Raj. Great talking with you.
That brings us to a close. Did you like what you heard? Did it tingle your earbuds? Support your startup ecosystem and share this episode with another founder to help them. If you don't have anyone in mind, then leave a rating and review of the show on iTunes so more entrepreneurs can learn about it. And if you want more, head to startuphypeman.com and click on the knowledge section to get a bonus blog post written by this week's guest where they unpack the topic even more. Remember to subscribe to the show on iTunes or Spotify or Google Play or wherever else you listen to podcasts. Startup Hype Man is more than a podcast. In fact, we support startups across the United States and globally, develop sales and marketing acumen with messaging that stands out to customers and stands apart from competitors. Learn more and fill out a form at startuphypeman.com if you want to chat. Shout out to this week's guests for spending their time with us, and shout out to music artist Sir the Baptist for providing our show's theme song. Catch you next time. Hype Man out. Word up. Raise up.
Got you howling at the moon, yeah. This a dance with the devil, bro. Instead of sundown too, yeah. This a dance with the devil, bro. Tell me what you gonna do, yeah. This a dance with the devil, bro. And if you can't get it loose, then fall into the truth. It got you howling at the moon, yeah. This a dance with the devil, bro. Instead of sundown, yeah. This a dance with the devil, girl. Tell me what you gonna do. Yeah. This a dance with the devil, girl. And if you can't get it loose, then it's a dance with the devil.